If you train with a heart rate monitor, it is absolutely imperative that you know what your heart rate zones are for optimum training and racing. But how do we know if the max heart rate number is accurate? Let me explain. When you're implementing a max heart rate assessment, what we want to do is we want to take a look at what is the average against the maximum that's achieved during this time trial and/or field test. If you're new to myself and you're new to our modalities, the biggest thing that I want you to keep in mind is the max heart rate number is going to be unique to the discipline that you're actually testing. We do quite a bit of work in the motorcycle racing world, so the weight of pushing and pulling a motorcycle is going to be much higher than somebody who's swimming. And this is a big mistake that a lot of people make, is they go and they get a max heart rate assessment done, maybe in a VO2 max environment in a clinical setting, but it's not taking into consideration the heat and the humidity and other things that influence your max heart rate number. But if we come back to the original topic of conversation, how do you validate the max heart rate number? Doesn't matter what discipline that you're doing. If you understand the value of training with accurate heart rate zones, that's number one and most important. Then understanding that you have to implement the right testing. That's the second side of the equation. So let's assume that those two ends of the bookcase are put into place. How do you finish that assessment and have confidence that that max heart rate number is going to be at its highest? One of the things to keep in mind when you're doing a max heart rate assessment is familiarity. If you're new to a sport and you're doing a max heart rate in that sport for the first time, you could actually debate whether or not, let's say you retest 2 or 3 times, maybe once every month or once every 6 weeks. You would have a good cause to say that you're able to push yourself a little bit harder because you were familiar with the discomfort associated with that specific modality at that high level of output. So that's legit. When we come back to, and we'll make a couple assumptions here, let's assume that you've had some pretty good years of experience or you've had decades of experience. How do we validate your max heart rate? Again, I want to make sure I'm crystal clear on this. If you're new to a sport, it's more about learning how to push through the discomfort to really get a max heart rate number. So I'm going to kind of put that scenario aside. Be patient with yourself. Let yourself kind of blossom and groom underneath that sport. But recognize that when you're getting more and more comfortable, let me give you an example. I don't want to speak vaguely here. Let's say that you're new to running. Well, as you become anaerobic, as you become physically fatigued, your biomechanics will fall apart. This is true for any sport that requires optimized biomechanics, which is all of them. Is it because your biomechanics fell apart and you weren't able to push yourself to that higher level of maximum output? Of course, that could be part of it. Is that going to skew the number? Absolutely. So I'm going to make another assumption here. If you're watching this video, you're comfortable with your sport of choice, you have good biomechanics, you can catch yourself when those biomechanics start to fall apart, and you know how to proactively offset them. If we go back to the running illustration, an accomplished runner knows that when he or she starts to fatigue, their hips, their shoulders fall back, their hips tuck underneath them, they have a tendency to land on their heels versus the midfoot. That's the kind of biomechanic improvement and awareness that we're looking for. Our top runners realize that when they get fatigued, you need to fall forward to increase the biomechanics and the efficiency. Now we loop back all the way to the beginning. When you want to validate your max heart rate number, bounce it against your average heart rate for that duration of time. So if we go to running and you're doing a 3-mile time trial, make sure that you start your Garmin right at the beginning of the assessment and then stop it immediately when you're finished. What that's going to allow you to do is you should be able to look at the maximum and the average, and ideally that deviation is not going to be more than 10, at the most 12 beats apart. Because when we go into training and we're using your max heart rate number, frequently I'll hear individuals say, but zone 3 feels easy. Well, please don't forget that we pulled your max heart rate number. So I say this in jest, but I mean it sincerely. If you are feeling like zone 3 is becoming too easy, pop another max heart rate assessment and make sure that your zones are accurate. Because when you stop and you think about how difficult that max heart rate assessment was, we're training off of those numbers. And it's easy to doubt it when you're training in zones 2 and 3 because it seems too easy. But remember, it was benchmarked off of your maximum number. That's why this video is so important. I want you to have confidence in that max heart rate number, and you could do it very simply by bouncing it off your average. In closing, I just want you to realize that if it's more than a 10-beat, 12-beat deviation, you need to redo the max heart rate. Because if it's more than 10 to 12 beats, one of those numbers is inaccurate. So that's why I'm saying if you start it right at the beginning and as soon as you cross the finish line, you will have confidence that your average number is correct. Because if you let it run for 5 to 10 minutes after you're finished, that obviously is going to skew the number downward, and that's going to have too much of a deviation. So it's just a simple checks and balances. And then the cool part about it is when you plug in, if you go to the description box here on YouTube, you'll see under our resource page, we have our heart rate spreadsheet right there for you. All you've got to do is plug in your max heart rate, your 4-week resting heart rate, and it auto-populates the 5 zones for you. So that's why this is so important that you do it accurately, because I need you to have confidence in the training zones, but you need to have confidence in where the numbers come from. Max heart rate assessment, and you bounce your average heart rate for that same period of time against it, you have 100% confidence. I know sometimes these videos can get a little bit technical, but all of these questions and these subjects on these videos are coming from you. So I want to say thank you for that. The number of questions that are coming in continues to escalate every week. If you happen to have a question similar to this, please send it to me at contact@coachrobb.com. Me and my team will make sure that we take the question apart. We'll get all the answers, put a video together. Please remember to like and subscribe. We put out a video every day. Again, we thank you for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.